are already hearing ourselves, but right now we are live. Remember, we are on Twitch, we are on YouTube, and we are on LinkedIn. I already sent the links on Discord channel. I will be sending here to shout out, to send to everyone, just share, use the chat. We are going to be mainly in Twitch chat. So let's go ahead, and Tracy, it's all yours.
All righty. Well, I'm waiting for my partner in crime. He went to go get another donut, I think. So I don't know where Steve went off to, but we will get started with beer and donuts. Welcome everybody. If you want to share your, go ahead and put yourself on video. That works. We love to see your smiley faces because it makes it more fun just to see everybody. We are doing beer and donuts, so anybody can have any discussion they want. I'm going to go through kind of where we are, what we've done over the course of the last 6 months. We always do a 6-month kind of checkpoint, and that's what beer and donuts is all about. We also do, as we know, presentations that we're going to be hosting that will be on Twitch, as Sergio indicated. And those presentations have all been pre-recorded. As soon as this is over, we will start using that content over the course of the next 6 months to drive more traffic to our website. And that brings me to a point that I forgot to put my, I bet you guys can hear me better now, huh?
I feel a lot better, but I didn't realize that you haven't.
My microphone was sitting on my desk. All right, let's get started to see where we're at right now. All right, so here's our accomplishments. We have now 602 LinkedIn followers, which is pretty amazing. We have 250 Google group members. So when we send out an email, it's now going out to 250 members, and we have 67 committers. So we have definitely defined a pretty awesome growing community. The community continues to grow. I can say what we haven't done as well is these 67, even though we have 67 committers, we need more activity around pull request. And when Steve gets back, I think I'll have him talk about that just for a minute. You know, it's always good to talk about what you did well, as well as where areas that we need to improve on. Outreach is doing really, really well. Syme has really taken this project on and has done a great job of the podcast in particular. We had 4 podcasts this year so far, which is great because this is only month 5. The podcasts are getting out there depending on who it is. People are starting to pick it up and watch the podcast. We have Brad Mccoy is doing a presentation in Valencia at the CD events. I'm doing a presentation at Supply Chain Security Con. I'm doing one at JFrog. I'm doing one with Tricentis, and I'm also doing one at CD Con. So we are getting the Ortelius message out through some of these activities. So if you've been part of one, I think my suggestion here in this area is we need more of you to be brave to submit for doing these talks. Some of you are really, really good presenters, and I've noticed that you're a little hesitant to submit to a DevOps world. I think we all have to be a little more brave. We need a little bit more of Arvin's approach. Arvin always puts his self out there, and I'm always so proud of him when he does. So some of the work that we've done on the product, just because some of you are not on the architecture meeting, so just some areas that we have focused on. So we've really focused on solving some of the problems around supply chain. One of the problems that we started hearing about that we were able to add as a feature into Ortelius is this aggregation of SBOM information up to the application level. So if you are in a microservice if you're pursuing microservices, every microservice has their own SBOM. In the US now, there is basically a executive order that says if you do business with the government, you need to be able to produce an application level SBOM. So what we did was we started aggregating that data up. So now at the application level, you can view an SBOM, and you can view all the vulnerabilities based on all of the underlying microservices. We're the only ones right now that is capable of producing this in the catalog. So it's an area that we should be super proud of. Now, on that same note, we added package searches across all applications. So you can submit this. When I ran this search, I just said everything, show me every package I'm using. But you could put in here, for example, log4j, and you could see every application that's consuming log4j, and you could see what version of the application it is, what component is using it, and what version of the package it's using. So now we're starting to take the intelligence around this DevOps gathering and starting to use it to produce important kind of reports. This is another one that if you're in a microservices environment and you want to know every service that's using that has a vulnerability because an open source package has been reported to have a vulnerability, it's hard to find this information. So now we're producing it. We are in the final round for $75K funding for our blockchain proof of concept. And I am going to ask Steve to talk about just quickly what we are up to in terms of how blockchain fits into this puzzle.
Yeah, so we have the proposal out there if you want to look at it. It's going to be in, there's a repo out there around the blockchain ledger. So one of the things that blockchain has is this transparency ledger. So every time you do something, you get an immutable ledger entry that goes, on forever. It's immutable. It's going to give us the history, and that fits perfectly into our concept of component versions and application versions. So what we're planning to do with the XRPR ledger is be able to store a component version, the JSON definition for a component version on the blockchain, and then in the ledger, and then doing the same thing for an application version, and storing that JSON definition on the blockchain ledger as well. This gives us an immutable view of what those versions look like, and it's going to fit well into the supply chain concept, because everything in the supply chain, people are trying to make it immutable, so you can make sure that nobody's messing with your applications and stuff. And this is where we can use that information, that immutable information, to drive difference reports, drift, those type of things. So the actual implementation is going to be in using XRPL and NFTs, which is non-fungible tokens, as part of the backing place. So that's what's kind of happening on that front. Just a shout out to Ukarsh and Joseph that did a lot of work around this, and help us move it along so we can actually get the Ripple folks to look at our code base and stuff like that. So been a big help on that front. So that's just basically what we got going on with the blockchain.
So Steve, tell us, when you talk about the application configuration, is that all the data associated to one version of an application, including its vulnerabilities, its SBOM, its locations of its inventory?
That is, most of the information will be stored in the ledger, but things like the vulnerabilities will probably point to the vulnerability database, because you can have vulnerabilities that get added. So let's say you have a component version out there, it has 2 vulnerabilities, and then somebody finds a new one today. Because the blockchain is immutable, we wouldn't be able to go back and update that to say that there's 3 vulnerabilities now. But we would be able to make that association in real time to the vulnerability database and show that there's now three vulnerabilities when yesterday there were 2.
I see, but the bill of material would be immutable.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that's probably, yeah.
The SBOMs have to be immutable, because you want to know what that component and application looked like at that point in time. And when we get into SBOMs, I think I'll talk about this a little bit later. The software bill and material reports, there's just not one of them. There's a bunch of little ones that are scattered about that need to be pulled together. So if you think about, you know, you have to know like what operating system or what hardware the binary is built on. Was it built on an ARM or an AMD processor? Because that'll change how the output of the program is. What version of the operating system, what patches were on the operating system for the compiler. All that information needs to be stored, and that's going to come through as different SBOMs that we will go through and aggregate together and throw on the blockchain.
So if any of you are curious and want to know more about SBOM, Steve did write a really interesting blog out on the Deploy Hub site. Steve, you want to pull that up and maybe put it in the chat?
Yep.
And some of you may know, but I was elected to the board of the OpenSSF as the general member for the community. So we got invited to go to Washington, D.C. last week, and we've been on a what they call one of the streams for better securing open source software. And the stream that we're on is called SBOMs, SBOMs Everywhere. And one of the areas that we saw as a problem is the accessibility of SBOMs and the use of it, because we have the ability to generate SBOMs now, but nobody really uses them. People are starting to think about applying them in some way, but not really. So this was some of the motivation in making sure that we are exposing SBOMs and associating them to an application version, and then figuring out a way using blockchain to make them immutable. So that's kind of the genesis of this particular avenue that we're taking and building out a blockchain to audit logical application configurations. All right, and then just one other topic on this. Sasha started a crowdfund in the Linux Foundation tools kind of dashboard. So if we do get the funding, it will be funded, that money will go to Ortelius and managed by the Linux Foundation through their crowdfunding platform, I guess you'd call it. So that's where the money would end up going. And we would use it to help pay some of the developers who've been working on the blockchain effort for their work. So it would be probably a short kind of burst because it's really a POC, but this gives us some funding to actually pay some of the people who've been working on this. All right, and on that note, let's talk about badges. Some of you may have gotten a badge over the period of the evening. Let's just go over some of the folks. Mark Eisenberg, he got a badge at the ambassador bronze level. He did a podcast for us. We have four new speakers. We have Turja, Miklos, Pavin, and Pia. They are our first-time speakers at the summit today, so you will be able to hear some of their talks. All of them have come to us from different individuals. Siddharth has been great to recruit a couple of the folks from NatWest, and I have heard their presentations and they're excellent. So I've heard everybody's presentation, but I'm super excited to have some of the folks from NatWest contributing. Sometimes, you know, contributing in this way is important to kind of get your profile improved. So let's say you want to present a talk at KubeCon or any of the Linux Foundation events or a DevOps World. They will often ask you for recorded versions of your presentations. In the past, this was really hard. This was a barrier that I struggled with because I would do presentations, but they wouldn't record all the presentations. They'd only record some of the keynotes. So I wouldn't have good material to put out there until I started getting recorded. And then I had that material and then I started getting invited. So if you have never done a presentation, these every 6-month events, they're a lot of work for us to put together. They're fun. We have Sergio to thank for really pulling all of this information together and building the platform to present it. But it gives you the opportunity to get your name back out there in terms of doing presentations. And that's one of the main reasons why we do it, is so that the community has a platform to kick off their outreach careers. Next is, where's my arrow? Okay, so we have some folks who are climbing up the ladder in terms of our badges. Brad Mccoy, he has reached champion level, and so that in bronze, he already had bronze and ambassador. So now he is now one of our legends. So he has now received a bronze in at the legend category. For those of you who may not know how we have this structured, we have 3 categories that you can earn badges in. We have ambassadors, who are our outreach group. So anybody who participated, for example, on today's presentations are part of the ambassadors. We have the people who do the coding, like Utkarsh, and they are what we call champions. Now, if you're doing both coding and you're doing work on outreach, we call you a legend, because that takes a lot of work. So to reach the legend status is pretty fun. So Brad has reached legend status, as well as Brian Dawson and Utkarsh. So they're all at the bronze level in legend, which means that they've done work at the bronze or silver level for champion and ambassadors. Syme has reached a silver level for ambassador. He has done a great job with building out the outreach community. He continues to really push that podcast. And that is super important, because he's doing it on a monthly basis. So we're starting to get kind of repeat business. And he has been able to recruit some very interesting folks for doing that. And then we have our superstar for this time, which is Sergio. He has achieved silver legend. Sergio has both worked on pull request as well as pull this together. And he's done this now. I think this is his 3rd effort in pulling this together. So we all should be giving him a big hooray, because it's not easy. It's not easy to do. I think I forgot. Let me see. I think I might have forgotten. Yes, I did. I forgot Victor Farsik. He has also received he's at the ambassador bronze level for participating in a podcast. So anybody who participated in a podcast over the course of the last 5 months also got a bronze badge. All right, now we are actually, I say head to Twitch, but we're not going to do that quite yet. When we first put this together, we thought about doing a panel. And we didn't really know what kind of panel discussion we were going to be having. So we decided to really talk about why we created a microservice catalog in the first place. And Sasha is going to lead that discussion. So we're going to, for the next 15, 20 minutes, we're really going to talk about the genesis of a microservice catalog, because we want to use this opportunity to do some, I would call, missionary work, so that all of you who have been here and are working on this can really understand how we came up with this idea and why we continue pursuing it, and why we continue to believe it's an important part of the DevOps tool chain and the supply chain solution. So Sasha, I'm going to hand it off to you. By the way, Sasha, I love your jacket. It must be a Van. It must be a Van's jacket. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, it's at least hopefully I finish every time. It's like my finishing jacket, like finishing the race.
Yeah, exactly. It's your finishing jacket.
Guys, I have to. I must say I forgot about this part of the.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You got the link to the questions?
Yeah, can you send it to me? Sorry, guys. Just being honest, yeah, I totally forgot about this part.
It's okay. Honesty is important.
Tracy, you got the link?
No, not right here.
Oh, give me 1 second. Eat your beer. Eat your beer and drink your donuts.
Yes, exactly.
Drink my donuts.
That's
drink
why
your
when I that's what I love when we involve with Sasha, because it's always a surprise. You never stop surprising me, friend. You never.
Don't worry.
You are the best.
I was wrestling with my videos. I think I did about 600 times. I must have felt like 600 times. Stop, record, and then I would mess it up. Yes, it was tough.
And this is part of this part of the lesson, right? In doing this,
Yeah.
you get
Exactly.
you get better at it. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Brian Dawson, I saw that he joined. Brian, could you say something about that? Because you've been doing presentations for a long time. And, this visionary summit is really part of educating and providing everyone a platform to learn to present. Why don't you give us some wisdom on it?
Wow. At 8 a.m. wisdom, that I am a little short of, but no, I mean, I think you have the point. It really is practice makes perfect. I myself have, was kind of just thrust into a presenting role at one of our game developer conferences when I was younger. I was deathly shy. I don't think I had established really a good cadence. I was nervous going into every presentation. I would say for the first 4 or 5 years of my career, up to presenting to an audience of 2,000 people live. But what worked for me again is just to continue to push through it, continue to push through the nervousness, encounter different situations, screw up in different places, learn what I can learn, but also realize that no matter what, the sky wasn't going to fall. I don't know, Tracy, exactly if that's what you're looking for, but that's sort of what my journey has been. Right.
So when the catalyst for me and being able to get to do talks was DevOps World.
Oh, wow.
Okay. DevOps World was the first conference I went to that they actually did a recording for every session. Nobody else until then that I had no other presentation that I had done that for us. So I was able to then, once I had that done that presentation for DevOps World, I used that to apply for other speaking engagements. So I have CloudBeast to thank for my opportunity to be able to speak. Because it was really hard. I still have not been accepted at KubeCon yet. I look forward to that.
I know
day.
we're jealous of Sime.
Sime got in there. I've not achieved that yet, and I continue to try. I submitted recently for KubeCon in October. So we'll see what happens, but I get accepted in so many others, and it's because I had that one opportunity to have my presentation recorded, and then people see that I actually could present. So if you're a good presenter, we're going to capture it and you can use it.
Yeah, that was one thing, when everything was in person for trade shows, nobody recorded anything.
Yeah.
And none of, all that knowledge was just kept in those conference rooms for a couple of days, and then you went home and it all was lost, which was a shame. And nowadays, with folks recording stuff and pushing it out, I think we're getting information out to a wider group, which is great.
Yeah.
Sasha, you're up.
You're up.
Thanks, guys, for backing me there, because I kind of missed that one. Thanks. Okay, so I've got the questions up here. And the first question is going to Tracy. Where did the concept of Ortelius come from?
So sometimes you stumble into, you kind of, I call it Forrest Gumping your way into a new idea. But if you think about our history in terms of where Deploy Hub came from, we in a previous company called Open Make Software were really into builds. software compile and links. That's all we thought about all the time, was how to make the build faster, how to make it more accurate, how to control it, how to tighten it, how to make sure you didn't have debug flags running in a production environment. Well, when you really think about what that is, it's really a big giant dependency management process. And when we started down this road, we built out a product called Meister, and Meister was resold by Computer Associates, now Broadcom, and it went out to, it was being consumed by about 400 different companies to manage their compile and link process. And then they started using it to do deployments, which it never was intended to do. And they were just using our workflow engine to do deployments. But when they started asking us to do deployments, we didn't see the world in terms of a monolith, even at that point in time. We saw the world in terms of individual components and the ability for each individual component to have its own deployment logic, because it was this, that's how we saw the world in terms of how something was compiled. Not everything uses the same compiler in a monolith application. You may have a resource compiler and you have a regular compiler. So every object had its own thing, right? It's had its own way of doing things. When we started looking at how we were shifting from monolith to microservices, we started understanding something really important. And that was, we lose the logical application, which means that we don't have a way to control dependencies as they're moving across the life cycle in the same way as we did if a new library was updated in Git, and now you recompile every application that uses that, statically linking it and pushing it out to production. So how do you solve that problem? And that's really where we started thinking about how to build out a component-driven release process. And that's really how we thought about it, a component-driven release process. And Phil Gibbs, who wrote some of the back end, started understanding that it wasn't just a component-driven release process, but we needed to version it. We needed to understand the versions in order to be able to do incremental releases. And when you think about a microservice world, every microservice is independently deployed. So we are always doing incremental releases. So you pull all that together and you step back and you say, how do you solve it? And you begin thinking about things like service catalogs and how a service catalog solved the problem for enterprises for managing the bigger applications that an enterprise would use, and how to centralize where those bigger applications or those bigger services were, like what version of Oracle should we download if we're going to stand up a new environment. That same logic applies to microservices with some changes. And one of those changes is how to manage the logical application. So that was the beginning of how we started thinking about solving the problem of tracking our North Star, which is always going to be a logical application. What are the components that's being consumed by that logical application? And how do you track the version and changes over time? Which is why we're still thinking about SBOMs, because it's the essence of everything that we have always done from the beginning of our career in terms of tracking changes. It's a configuration management problem that we're solving, but that term now is called supply chain management. So basically, it's the same thing, just in a new angle.
Oh, it's super great. I also remember having my first conversation with you when you said you have a passion for mapping, cartography, right?
Yep.
And that's where Ortelius stems from, right? And it kind of makes complete sense how Ortelius maps microservices. So it's really cool how that whole thing fits together.
And by the way, that's why we do this celebration on May 20th, is because May 20th is the date that Abraham Ortelius released his first world atlas. And in essence, if you think about what the Ortelius catalog is, it is a map of every microservice, who's consuming it, where it's running, what cluster. So we're literally mapping out a cluster with Ortelius.
Yeah, it's always stuck with me because it presents such a visual, right? It gives you such a visual of what it does and helps you understand what Ortelius is. Great, thank you very much. Steve, you have the next question.
All right.
Can you give us a high-level review of how Ortelius does its versioning at both the component and application level?
Yeah. So one of the, like Tracy was saying, one of the things that we recognized is we needed to represent deployable objects as components. And to dive in a little more, we needed to look at the versions of those components, because you could have one version in production that's different than the version that's in QA, that's different than the version that's in development. So we needed to have that versioning aspect to Ortelius, and that allowed us to really look at how things changed over time. Now, the next thing that we recognized was that you needed to package together those component versions into something that you can represent at the application level. You could also think of an application. We've been toying with this for years, is whether we should stick with the application, go to project or solution, or however you want to think of it. But there's going to be the next higher level where we package those component versions into an application version. And that's where, because we have that logical application version, we can actually diff, what components changed between production and what's in the pre-prod environment. So the SREs can see what type of impact they're going to get when they roll this out. So that was one of the key things that we put into Ortelius. Now, one of the challenges that we're kind of having, but I think it's going to work out, is we're recognizing like Docker images, which we consider a component version, have packages within them. So we actually have components within components. Right now, the terminology that I've been using is just those are packages, and because you have like an npm package, you may have like a Python module. There's some terminology, but we're sticking with the generic package. So a component version is made up of package versions at that level. So that's kind of like where the SBOM comes in. We're looking at taking the SBOM, which is going to list out the package level information, associate that to the component version, and then we'll do another level of aggregation of the component versions up to the application version level. Now, some of the things that we haven't gotten into at the SBOM level is like how to record hardware SBOMs. That nobody's really gotten into that world yet, but that's going to be some important details. Also, like just environment configuration. What were the environment variables set on the machine? Those type of things are still out there that we need to capture. But we're just taking the low hanging fruit right now, which is going to be the software SBOMs.
Sorry, I was just going to find my mute button. The famous thing. Thanks very much, Steve. That's great explanation. Stacey, we going back over to you. When did you decide to contribute Ortelius to open source?
Oh, quite some time ago, actually. So before Deploy Hub was created, we had the base of Ortelius was owned by a company called OpenMake Software. It was the metamorphosis of our build tool turning into a release management tool, because people kept asking us to manage releases. But I didn't really feel like, even though the team at the time believed that there would be one release tool to rule them all, I never believed that. I always believed that, every component has its own logic. It's going to be scripts. It could be Helm. It could be Spinnaker. It didn't matter. And when we started looking at the broader picture of microservices, this is a hard problem to solve. And I never believed that we could solve it as a small company in a silo. So during the OpenMake Software days, way early on, I started saying we need to contribute this to an open source project. We need to make this open source. We then we spun off a new company called Deploy Hub. We did a lot of magic when it comes to restructuring the company so that the code base that is now Ortelius could come out of OpenMake software and go into Deploy Hub, and then Deploy Hub contributed that. But I knew years before that I wanted to have an open source version of this particular product. You know, there is something to be said as you progress in your career and you get a little older, you want to do something and give something back to the community who's given you so much. And this career for me has been amazing. And I think open source is the best way to do that. So a lot of people think that, you know, giving your code away is kind of crazy. But to be honest, there's a couple of ways to build a product like this. One way would be to go out and get funding and you know, have the VC types manage it and make decisions on where the product should go. You end up selling your company early when you do that, which means you're letting go of the code base anyway. The second way would be to take the open source route, which means that instead of handing it off to a VC, we're handing it off to the community and allowing the community to drive where and how the product is going to be built. And ultimately, those products are always much better than what a VC board can decide on, because they're going to just focus on income, which is important. But if we were to do that, I'm guessing that we would still be looking at trying to solve monolithic problems, because that's where most of the money is right now. It's not in microservices. We talk about them, but most companies are still doing monolithic development. Not a lot of companies are doing microservices. We're looking at solving a problem that most companies will see in maybe 2 or 3 years. Actually, it's starting to show up now. We talk to more and more companies who are struggling with tracking versions of tracking the drift of a service across clusters. But ultimately, it was a decision about giving back to the community and having the community decide where this product's going to go and give something out where this problem can be solved without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a commercial product and an enterprise kind of solution. So that was how we decided it. It was something I had wanted to do ever since I was a founding member of the Eclipse Foundation, and I loved working on that. And I always wanted to do something ourselves for open source. And then when I started working with the CD Foundation, it was obvious that that was the perfect avenue. But it did take us a year, guys. It took us a year to get accepted into the CD Foundation. So it wasn't easy. And all of you contributed to the success of that. And now here we are.
Yes, we love our members.
We do. You guys are awesome. And, you know,
Awesome.
and I was going to, you know, Steve, while you were gone, I was going to point out that when we were looking through our badges, one of the areas that we saw that we were lacking is getting pull requests created. So having more actual code committers, that is one of the areas that we need to improve on. And then the other area that we need to improve on, while it's starting to improve, is adoption. And I know that Sergio has talked about that. So I think as we look from now to the next 6 months in our beer and donuts, we will hopefully have some adopters doing these presentations. We had one that was going to Depeche, but he just couldn't pull it together. And I know that next time in December, I think he will do a presentation on their adoption. But those are areas that we need to focus on in terms of improving this particular open source community.
Yeah, I mean, we even have socks with little aliens on them. How cool is that?
We do. And we're finally going to get our own t-shirts. I think that Steve is finally, Siddharth and Utkarsh have been working on getting our nylon like running jackets and our t-shirt.
Yeah.
I think Steve has sorted out how to get payment across the pond, and we'll get that done. And Siddharth and Utkarsh, thank you so much for volunteering to be the t-shirt and jacket central for India. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to get that stuff to India. So that's how we're solving it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tracy. Steve, we're swinging back over to you now. Can you give us a high-level review? I think I already said that question. I think I'm a little bit further down the list now. What does the open source roadmap look like for Ortelius?
Yeah, so we have some fun things happening, and we talked about the blockchain. So that is going to be an area of interest that we need to build out. More along the SBOMs and vulnerabilities. That part, we have, we've plumbed it together, so we have some basic stuff working, but there's some improvements that we need to make on that side. One of them is being able to fetch the data from the open source security foundation. One of their projects is called OSV. Basically, it's an aggregated vulnerability database, and their endpoint APIs are too slow, so we need to do some work to kind of like federate that data down into our database so we can make some quicker lookups. We have Libier that Aisha is working on. She's taken a new position, so she's had to kind of back off for a little bit on that, but we have Libier stuff, which is like giving us how, like, the age of packages, if you're consuming them. Are you using the latest one, or are you 5 versions behind? Ukarsh did a little bit of work on some new representation of how things are happening with application versions over time. So some new graphing or graph libraries that we'll be using. So those are the type of things that we have going on. And also Brad Mccoy has been pushing the GitOps process with Captain and Argo. We are trying to get to that last sprint of getting the final pieces in place to pull it all together. So we have, work done over here, work done over there, and we just need to put it all together. So that's some of the things that we're going to be focusing on in the next 6 months.
And there's some things I have on. I have things on my wish list too. I think we should start having a discussion about integrating with Backstage, because if there's folks already have adopted Backstage and they tag their when they register a microservice in Backstage, you can tag it, and those tags could be directly mapped to our domains, and then we could start doing the versioning on the back end. So I think we're an interesting complement to Backstage, and Backstage is also a CNCF project that's probably going to be graduating soon. I think it would be that's an interesting proposal. So I think we should keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and in the next couple of days we'll have something new that we need to look at. It's a fast moving environment from what I could tell, especially around the supply chain pieces. There will be integrations that we'll need to make down the road with SigStore, Persia. So there's a lot of stuff at the supply chain level that will, because the way Ortelius is designed, we just suck up all this data to be able to pull things together. One of the other things that we're working on the deploy up side is like a DevOps adoption dashboard. How well are our teams adopting DevOps practices? And once we get that done, we'll push that back down push that up into Ortelius as part of that process. So, like I said, things change so quickly in our world, but that's what it looks like for probably the next 6 months.
And the other thing,
sorry.
Oh, I was going to say the other thing we need to do is we need to talk about doing we have a proper governance board now, and now that governance board, we need to talk about doing elections for a proper technology oversight committee. So that's kind of, we've got all the pieces in place. We do have a technology oversight committee, but they have been kind of recruited. We've never had proper elections for them, but I think that closing in on, as we go into this second part of the year, one of the things we'll have to add, and the governance board needs to talk about that, is an election for a proper technology oversight committee, so that they can help drive direction. And we will need to have somebody from the CD Foundation. Tara Hernandez is right now on our TOC. And so is Steve. Steve's part of the board of the Technology Oversight Committee for the CDF. So we have the right people. We just have to now have elections to bring in some additional folks. So we should be watching for that too.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Awesome. Oh, yeah, no, sorry. When Steve said suck up, I just had this vision of a vacuum cleaner, kind of sucking up microservices.
Yeah, that's why Sergio has that picture of the alien scanning a container.
Yeah,
It's just pulling all
that
the
makes
information up.
Beam me up.
Exactly. That's why it's
Beaming
beaming
up all the-
Ortelius. Yes.
Exactly. Beaming up all the versions and all those type of things. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Tracy, the last question is for you. What kind of open source developers does the Ortelius team need?
We need some data scientists. So if you know anybody who's into machine learning or data science, because the more data we get, the more we could do with that data. We need to be able to do better predictive analysis for folks. We should be able to start determining risk levels of microservices. We should be able to be scanning CVEs across a cluster, for example, and being able to report on that kind of stuff. So we need some data scientists. So if you know anybody, reach out. I've knocked on many doors on LinkedIn and looked for data scientists. We've never gotten anybody to kind of embrace it. And of course, Python developers, anybody who wants to learn more about how to build microservices, because Ortelius is a true microservice architecture now. Has offered some challenges because I don't think the industry is ready, including Microsoft in their marketplace. So we've run into some problems with that, but it is a true microservice environment. So anybody who wants to be part of a microservice team and learn that, and have already has like Go or Python or even JS, we're looking for them. But I think data science is the area that we lack the most expertise in.
Awesome.
Anybody?
Thank you very
Anybody else? Yeah. Anybody else has any Ukarsh? What is your thoughts? I know you've been working a lot on coding. What do you think?
Thinking as such, where do we lack?
Yeah, where do we lack?
I think we should be like spending more time on grooming our backlogs and defining the priority, and like in this way we can have like focus on particular area in a particular quarter or something, and this way we can spend like a lot of time focusing on one thing and developing that like a very useful like as a collective team. So I think that I think is a missing part that I see, a well-groomed backlog.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm awful at, is being a project manager. Guaranteed, that's not me. I try, but I fail. I can do the technical stuff, but yeah, Ukarsh is definitely right that if we had somebody that would be able to, look at the issues, help figure out how to group them together, how we can get some focus on it, I think that would be a huge help to get some fast coding done.
Well, we're planning on trying to have dinner with Brian and Marky Jackson next week. So maybe we can recruit Marky to come back, because he is an excellent project manager. I know that he's gotten other things going, but man, it'd be great to have him take a look at some of our stuff. We'll shoot for that. Brian, do you think we have any chance? Oh, okay. Well, we're going to work on it. Okay, well, that takes us to the end of this first section of Beer and Donuts. I hope you all enjoyed this live version of it, and congratulations to everybody who got a badge. Proud of you all, and thank you for all the hard work. For those of you who are climbing the ladder and getting into those legend and the silver levels, it's not an easy task to do. We do have it set up where you have to do some work. I think Brad Mccoy missed being able to get to the next level by one pull request or something really silly. So I'm assuming that next time he'll be there. But thank you all really for your commitment to this project and the efforts you've put into it. And on that, we have a Twitch channel that you should jump over to. So in case you don't know, oh no, here is where you should go.
Twitch.tv/Ortelius OS.
Yes. And over there, we will be finishing the rest of this, our crazy little conference. And we have 9 presentations to see. So I hope you all enjoy it. And we will chat there. So don't forget, there is a chat in it and you can talk to us.
Yes, so while we are a little ahead and we have some time, we are going to do a little break. We are going to have a little space for an awesome videos about UFOs. So we will like watching and stepping ahead. So take this break, recharge your batteries, because we are going to start a huge stage for lightning talks. There is 9 of them and are really awesome. So don't miss the stream. We will sharing the agenda. We have countdown, so you have like pretty old information to just schedule your technical stage and anything you need. So let's see you everyone in the stream. Just hit the chat every time you need it. Shield, hope you enjoyed this. So watch you, and I will see you at the end because we have a closing thoughts and we will back on Zoom. So meanwhile, see you in the stream. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye all.
See you on the stream.
Bye, everyone.